A liberal calculus professor thought she could humiliate Barron Trump in front of the entire class, but what happened next left her speechless. She expected to expose his privilege. She had no idea she was challenging a mathematical genius with 170 IQ. By the end of this story, you won't just be shocked. You'll see why true intelligence always rises above politics. Stick around, because this is one classroom showdown you won't forget. At one of America's most prestigious universities, Dr. Linda Markham, a well-respected but politically outspoken calculus professor, was known for integrating her social justice agenda into her lectures. On this particular morning, as students entered the lecture hall, they were met with an unusual sight. Instead of complex mathematical equations, the whiteboard displayed the phrase, "Redefining academic priorities." This signaled that today's lesson would not be about advanced calculus, but rather about politics and ideology. Among the students sat Barron Trump, a reserved yet academically gifted young man, whose presence often sparked whispers due to his last name. However, what many didn't realize was that Barron possessed a mathematical brilliance that would soon challenge the very premise of the professor's lecture. Dr. Markham took center stage and began arguing that mathematics should make room for social justice discussions, rather than focusing solely on abstract theories. She proceeded to display statistics about gender representation in STEM fields, subtly implying that some students, especially those from privileged backgrounds, might not have earned their place based on merit alone. Without directly naming Barron, she hinted at the role family wealth and connections play in academic success, effectively challenging the legitimacy of students like him. Despite the clear provocation, Barron remained calm and composed. Slowly raising his hand, he waited patiently for his turn to speak. When finally acknowledged, he responded in a respectful but firm tone, emphasizing that calculus and rigorous academic standards were essential for all students, regardless of their background. He pointed out that reducing the difficulty of coursework in favor of social discussions would ultimately harm everyone, not just those perceived as privileged. His poised and logical response surprised many students, some of whom began nodding in agreement. However, instead of engaging in an academic debate, Dr. Markham took a more confrontational approach, choosing to challenge Barron in a way she believed would expose his so-called privilege. What happened next would leave the entire class in stunned silence. As Dr. Markham's lecture shifted from calculus to social justice, she became increasingly pointed in her remarks, implying that privilege, not merit, played a significant role in academic success. With a knowing glance at Barron Trump, she presented a PowerPoint slide on wealth and family connections, suggesting that certain students had unfair advantages in education. The implication was clear. She believed Barron's presence in the class was not due to intelligence, but privilege. Despite this indirect attack, Barron remained composed, his hands still raised, waiting patiently to respond. When Dr. Markham finally acknowledged him, her tone was laced with amusement and condescension as she invited him to share his thoughts on privilege in education. The room fell silent as students turned their attention to the exchange, many expecting Barron to falter under the professor's scrutiny. However, his response was both measured and profound. He acknowledged that he had indeed been fortunate in his education, but argued that high academic standards should be upheld for everyone, regardless of background. Lowering the bar under the guise of fairness, he reasoned, would ultimately disadvantage all students. Dr. Markham's expression hardened, her confidence slightly shaken. Rather than engage in a debate, she attempted to undermine Barron's credibility, sarcastically questioning what made him an expert on academic rigor. Instead of reacting defensively, Barron responded calmly, asserting that he was not claiming to be an expert, but rather a student who valued the pursuit of knowledge above politics. Gesturing toward the blank whiteboard, he subtly challenged the professor's decision to prioritize ideology over actual mathematics. This moment marked a turning point. Dr. Markham, determined to regain control, decided to test Barron in a way she believed would humiliate him. However, she had no idea what she was about to unleash. With a smirk of confidence, Dr. Markham seized the opportunity to challenge Barron Trump publicly, believing she could expose what she saw as his unearned privilege. Striding to the whiteboard, she rapidly wrote a complex, multivariable calculus equation, far beyond the course's current scope. The equation was one typically reserved for graduate-level students, designed to be so difficult that Barron or any undergraduate student would struggle to solve it. "Since you're so passionate about maintaining high academic standards," she taunted, "why don't you prove it?" The challenge was unmistakable, and the tension in the room thickened. A hushed murmur spread through the class. Many students recognized this for what it was, an unfair attempt at public humiliation. One student even whispered, "That's graduate-level math." Expecting Barron to hesitate or back down, Dr. Markham folded her arms, confident that she had backed him into a corner. But Barron didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly stood up, his expression unreadable, and walked to the front of the room. "Of course, Professor," he said smoothly. "I'd be happy to try." As he studied the equation, his demeanor remained steady, analytical, focused, completely at ease. Rather than showing panic, his eyes scanned the problem with genuine interest. Then, he turned to the class and asked, "Would you prefer I use the standard approach, or would you like to see a more efficient solution?" Dr. Markham's smirk faltered slightly. "You've read Leibniz's original papers?" she asked, momentarily caught off guard by his casual mention of advanced mathematical theory. Barron nodded. "In German," he added, "translations don't quite capture the elegance of his methodology." The room fell silent. What was meant to be his downfall had just become the moment that would change everything. As Barron picked up the marker and began solving the problem, students leaned forward in their seats, fully captivated. Dr. Markham had tried to humiliate him, but in doing so, she had unknowingly given him the perfect stage to showcase his genius. As Barron Trump picked up the marker, the entire classroom fell silent, watching in anticipation. Dr. Markham, who had expected hesitation or failure, stood frozen, her earlier smug confidence slowly fading. With steady precision, Barron began solving the equation, his hand moving fluidly across the whiteboard. "This first step," he explained calmly, "utilizes a technique developed by Euler in 1755 to simplify the complexity of the integral." His words weren't just impressive, they were unmistakably authoritative. Instead of simply writing down numbers, Barron began teaching as he solved, walking his classmates through every step. The silence in the room deepened. Students who had struggled with calculus suddenly found themselves understanding concepts that once seemed intimidating. Some even started taking notes, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. Dr. Markham's confidence continued to unravel. Her initial challenge had been meant as an act of humiliation, but it was backfiring spectacularly. As Barron approached the final steps, he paused. "We now have two possible paths forward," he said, turning to the class. "We can proceed with the traditional method, which would require another full board of calculations. Or we can use Leibniz's original insights, making it far more elegant and efficient. Which would you prefer?" The class held its breath as the question hung in the air. Before Dr. Markham could respond, a quiet voice spoke up. "Could we see both?" Sarah Chen, a typically reserved student, asked hesitantly. "This is actually helping me understand last week's lesson." Barron smiled warmly. "Of course," he nodded. Dr. Markham, however, stood rigid, eyes darting across the board as if realizing the magnitude of her mistake. The challenge she had set to humiliate Barron had transformed into a masterclass in mathematics. She had expected arrogance, but what she got was humility, patience, and undeniable brilliance. The entire class saw it, and for the first time, it wasn't Dr. Markham who held control over the room. It was Barron Trump. As Barron Trump stood at the whiteboard, having just completed the intricate multivariable calculus problem, the room remained completely still. The weight of what had just unfolded was undeniable. He had not only solved the problem effortlessly, but had also explained it with such clarity that even students who had struggled with calculus before found themselves grasping its concepts. The moment felt surreal. A student had just outclassed his own professor in her subject. Dr. Markham, who had set this challenge as a trap, now stood motionless, her once smug expression replaced by an unreadable stiffness. The marker she had tried to use as a weapon against Barron was now lying abandoned on her desk, as if it too had surrendered. But instead of reveling in the professor's discomfort, Barron did something unexpected. He turned to the class, not as a triumphant opponent, but as a mentor. "The beauty of mathematics," he said, his voice calm yet authoritative, "is that it doesn't care about background, politics, or privilege. It only cares about truth and understanding." The class, which had been holding its collective breath, erupted in murmurs of approval. Several students, some of whom had initially sided with Dr. Markham, now looked at Barron with newfound respect. Dr. Markham cleared her throat, as if attempting to regain control, but before she could speak, Michael Chen, a scholarship student in the back, raised his hand. "I came here to learn calculus, not to be lectured on politics," he said firmly. Several students nodded in agreement. At that moment, it was clear that the atmosphere in the classroom had shifted. The professor, who once dictated the room with an iron grip, now found herself out of sync with the very students she had sought to influence. And Barron Trump? He simply set the marker down, his job already done. As the tension in the room reached its peak, Dr. Markham stood frozen, marker in hand, her face a mixture of disbelief and frustration. The very equation she had intended as a weapon of humiliation had now turned into a test of her own credibility. Barron Trump, with his calm confidence and unmatched mathematical prowess, had just delivered a masterclass in calculus, one that left both his peers and his professor speechless. But Barron wasn't done yet. Instead of basking in his victory, he did something no one expected. He turned to Dr. Markham and extended an olive branch. "Professor," he said in a voice devoid of arrogance, "perhaps we can solve this problem together. Sometimes collaboration leads to a better understanding." The class held its breath, watching for Dr. Markham's reaction. Would she accept his invitation to turn this moment into a true learning experience? Or would she let her pride dictate her next move? But the professor's ego wouldn't allow her to back down gracefully. She threw the marker onto the desk, her voice laced with frustration. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "This entire display is nothing more than a privileged student trying to undermine my authority." A murmur spread through the room. The tide had turned, and she knew it. Then, Barron picked up the marker once again. "Let's take a step forward," he said, and in a dazzling display of mathematical brilliance, he completed both solutions, one using the standard method and another utilizing Leibniz's original approach, in under 5 minutes. The class erupted into applause. Even students who had previously felt intimidated by the subject now leaned forward, captivated. The moment was no longer about proving who was right or wrong. It was about something far greater: the power of merit, knowledge, and intellectual humility. And as Dr. Markham stood in silence, she realized something shocking. She had just learned the greatest lesson of her career from a student. In the aftermath of the unexpected intellectual showdown, Dr. Markham stood in silence, her once unshakable authority now in question. The classroom, once filled with students afraid to challenge her views, had transformed into a place of open debate and genuine curiosity. The applause that had erupted after Barron Trump's flawless demonstration of mathematical genius had not just been about his ability to solve the equation. It was about what he had proven. Barron had demonstrated that knowledge should transcend personal biases. He had shown that intellectual humility was far more valuable than ideological rigidity. Instead of using his intelligence to humiliate, he had used it to uplift, to inspire, and to teach. Even students who had initially sided with Dr. Markham began to see that her attempts to frame education as a battle of privilege versus merit had ultimately backfired. But Barron wasn't done yet. Instead of relishing in his victory, he turned to his classmates. "The beauty of mathematics," he said, "is that it doesn't care about politics, backgrounds, or personal beliefs. It only cares about truth." His words carried a weight of wisdom beyond his years, and they resonated deeply with the students in the room. Some of them had previously felt intimidated by the class's political undertones, but now they felt empowered to learn freely without fear of judgment. In the days that followed, Dr. Markham, humbled by the experience, slowly changed her approach. She focused less on social narratives and more on the subject she had once loved, mathematics. Attendance in her class tripled, and students began to genuinely enjoy learning once again. What had started as an attempt to undermine Barron Trump had ended in an unexpected transformation, not just of a professor, but of an entire classroom culture. Barron had won the battle, not with arrogance, but with wisdom, patience, and an unshakable belief in the power of education. The impact of Barron Trump's response in Dr. Markham's calculus class extended far beyond the walls of that lecture hall. Word of the incident spread across campus, turning what had started as a moment of intellectual defiance into an inspiring example of academic integrity and true leadership. Students who had once felt silenced by ideological pressure now saw that they had the right to question authority and demand fairness in their education. What made Barron's actions so remarkable was not just his mathematical brilliance, but his grace and humility. Instead of humiliating his professor in return, he had offered a chance for growth, reflection, and unity. Rather than using the moment for personal triumph, he had reminded everyone in the room that education should be about truth, not politics. Dr. Markham, to her credit, took the lesson to heart. In the following weeks, her teaching approach shifted, and her once politically charged lectures became focused on the subject matter itself. She even collaborated with Barron, allowing him to help struggling students after class in study sessions that quickly gained popularity. The class that had once been divided by bias and intimidation became a model of academic excellence, proving that true education thrives when merit is prioritized over ideology. One day, after a particularly challenging session, Dr. Markham approached Barron. "You could have used that moment to ruin my credibility," she admitted. "Instead, you used it to make the class better." Barron smiled. "The goal was never to tear anyone down," he replied. "It was to build something better." His words encapsulated the true spirit of learning, one where wisdom, respect, and the pursuit of truth triumph over division and prejudice. The legacy of what happened in Dr. Markham's calculus class didn't just stop at one lecture. It transformed the entire academic environment of the university. What started as an attempt to publicly humiliate Barron Trump had instead ignited a movement. The video of his intellectual triumph went viral, sparking discussions across multiple campuses about the role of politics in education and the importance of merit-based learning. More than just an inspiring moment, Barron's response had a lasting impact on both students and faculty. Attendance in the advanced calculus class tripled, not just because students wanted to learn mathematics, but because they had found a place where true intellectual curiosity could thrive. Dr. Markham, once known for pushing ideological narratives, became a better educator, allowing her students to focus on their academic growth rather than social activism in a math class. But perhaps the most powerful transformation was seen in the students themselves. Those who had once feared speaking up now felt empowered to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and demand a classroom experience that was free from bias. Barron, true to his nature, remained humble despite the recognition. He continued to sit in the back of the class, helping struggling students, ensuring that the focus remained on learning rather than personal accolades. One day, as he finished explaining a particularly challenging problem to a group of classmates, a professor from another department approached him. "You've changed more than just a class," the professor admitted. "You've changed the culture." Barron simply smiled. Education isn't about proving someone wrong, it's about discovering what's right. And with that, he returned to his seat, proving once again that true intelligence isn't about arrogance. It's about the willingness to learn, teach, and uplift others. The impact of Barron Trump's actions in Dr. Markham's calculus class extended far beyond the lecture hall. His calm, calculated response to the professor's attempted humiliation did more than just restore the focus on education. It shifted the entire academic culture of the university. What started as a single moment of intellectual defiance soon evolved into a movement for academic integrity, pushing back against politicized classrooms and emphasizing merit-based learning. As the weeks passed, more students began attending advanced calculus, not just to study mathematics, but to experience a class where intellectual curiosity was valued over ideology. Discussions flourished, students felt encouraged to challenge ideas, and most importantly, they weren't afraid to ask questions anymore. Even Dr. Markham, humbled by her own misjudgment, adapted her teaching approach, shifting from political rhetoric to a genuine focus on mathematical excellence. But the change wasn't just limited to that one class. Professors across departments took notice, and soon, other students were following Barron's example, standing up for academic integrity, demanding unbiased learning environments, and pushing for education to be about knowledge rather than activism. The viral video of the debate between Barron and Dr. Markham became a symbol, sparking conversations nationwide about the true purpose of education. Yet through it all, Barron remained unchanged. Despite the praise, admiration, and even controversy, he continued to sit in the back of the classroom, helping students who struggled. He didn't seek attention or accolades. His only goal was to ensure that every student, regardless of background, had the chance to learn in an environment where hard work and dedication mattered more than political labels. One afternoon, after another engaging lecture, Dr. Markham approached Barron, a newfound respect in her eyes. "You've taught me something more valuable than any equation," she admitted. "Merit, knowledge, and the pursuit of truth. Those are the only things that should define education." Barron smiled. "Then I guess we're finally solving for the right answer." One of the most important lessons from this story is that true knowledge and wisdom are not defined by status, politics, or preconceived notions. In life, we often encounter situations where people judge others based on assumptions rather than merit. However, genuine intelligence and character shine through actions, humility, and the ability to bridge divides. For older audiences, this serves as a reminder that experience and wisdom should not be dismissed in favor of fleeting trends or ideologies. Education, much like life, is about continuous learning, and the greatest minds are those willing to listen, adapt, and teach with integrity. Additionally, the story highlights the power of grace under pressure. Instead of responding to provocation with hostility, Barron Trump chose respect and logic, proving that real strength lies in composure and confidence, not arrogance or dominance. This is an invaluable lesson for all generations. How we respond to challenges defines our character far more than the challenge itself. Ultimately, true leadership isn't about defeating others, but about lifting people up, fostering understanding, and ensuring that knowledge remains free from bias. This is a principle that resonates across all ages and backgrounds, emphasizing that wisdom, integrity, and learning never lose their value. And that, my friends, is the power of knowledge, humility, and true leadership. Barron Trump didn't just prove his intelligence. He showed that real wisdom isn't about tearing others down, but about lifting everyone up. This wasn't just a lesson in calculus, but a lesson in integrity, resilience, and the importance of merit over bias. In a world where agendas often cloud true learning, this moment reminded everyone of the real purpose of education: to challenge, to grow, and to seek truth, no matter the circumstances. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep seeking knowledge, keep standing for truth, and never stop learning. God bless you, and God bless America.